Baker Hotel in Mineral Wells, Texas, has been abandoned since the 1970s, but many believe it's still inhabited by something not human. In 2020, a paranormal investigator named Mark decided to spend the night there. What he experienced left him permanently scarred. The Baker Hotel was once a luxurious resort, famous for its healing mineral waters. But after it closed, it became a hotspot for paranormal activity. Stories of ghostly apparitions, disembodied voices, and shadowy figures have kept most people away, but not Mark. Mark was a seasoned investigator, having explored dozens of haunted locations. He arrived at the hotel with his equipment, cameras, audio recorders, and EMF detectors. As he walked through the crumbling lobby, he felt an immediate sense of unease. The air was thick, and the silence was oppressive. He set up his equipment in one of the old ballrooms and began his investigation. At first, everything was quiet, but around midnight, his EMF detector spiked and the temperature dropped drastically. He heard footsteps echoing down the hallway, though no one was there. Then the whispers began, soft at first, but growing louder and more frantic. Mark tried to remain calm, but when he saw a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, he panicked. He grabbed his equipment and ran, but the hallways seemed to shift and twist, leading him in circles. The whispers turned into screams, and the shadowy figure appeared again and again, always just out of reach. Finally, Mark found his way back to the lobby and fled the building. When he reviewed his footage later, he found something horrifying. The shadowy figure was visible in every frame, always just behind him. And on the audio recordings, he could hear a voice whispering his name over and over. Mark never returned to the Baker Hotel, but he couldn't escape what he had experienced. He began having nightmares of the shadowy figure, and he would wake up to find scratches on his arms and legs. He eventually quit paranormal investigating, but he still hears the whispers sometimes late at night. The Baker Hotel remains abandoned, but those brave or foolish enough to enter often report similar experiences. And if you ever hear whispers in the dark, don't turn around, because whatever's behind you might not be human. In the dense forests of East Texas, there's a stretch of road near Saratoga known as the Devil's Road. Locals say it's haunted by the spirits of those who died in a tragic school bus accident in the 1930s. But in 2019, a group of friends decided to test the legend, and only one of them returned. The road, officially called Bragg Road, is a narrow, unpaved path surrounded by towering pine trees. It's said that if you drive down it at night, you'll see ghostly lights floating in the distance. Some say they're the lanterns of the dead searching for their lost children. In October 2019, 4 friends, Jake, Mia, Ryan, and Sarah, decided to visit the road on a dare. They were skeptical but curious, armed with cameras and flashlights. As they drove down the road, the atmosphere grew heavy. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the air became unnaturally still. About halfway down the road, they saw it, a faint, flickering light in the distance. At first, they thought it was another car, but as they got closer, the light split into multiple orbs, floating just above the ground. Jake stopped the car, and they all got out to investigate. The orbs moved erratically, as if alive, and a low, mournful wail filled the air. Suddenly, the lights rushed toward them. Mia screamed as one passed through her, leaving her frozen in place. Ryan tried to run back to the car, but the lights surrounded him, and he vanished into the darkness. Sarah and Jake managed to get back into the car, but as they drove away, they saw Ryan standing in the middle of the road, his eyes glowing with the same eerie light. Sarah refused to speak about what happened that night. Jake, however, became obsessed with finding out the truth. He returned to the road multiple times, each time capturing more strange phenomena on camera. But on his final visit, he disappeared. His car was found abandoned, the engine still running, and his camera was filled with footage of the ghostly lights and what appeared to be Ryan and Mia, their faces twisted in agony. The road remains a popular spot for thrill seekers, but locals warn that the spirits are not to be trifled with. And if you ever see the ghostly lights, don't stop. Just keep driving, because if you don't, you might become one of them. In 2017, a commercial flight from London to New York was forced to make an emergency landing after passengers reported seeing a man who wasn't on the manifest. But when the plane landed, the man was gone, and the crew discovered something horrifying in his seat. The flight was packed, and the atmosphere was lively. Among the passengers was Emma, a young journalist traveling for work. About halfway through the flight, she noticed a man sitting a few rows ahead of her. He was dressed in outdated clothing, a brown suit and hat that looked like they belonged in the 1950s. What struck her most was his stillness. He didn't move, didn't eat, didn't even blink. Emma mentioned it to the flight attendant, who checked the manifest. There was no record of the man. The attendant approached him, but when she tried to speak, he turned his head slowly and stared at her with hollow eyes. She backed away, visibly shaken. Soon other passengers began to notice him. A child started crying, pointing at the man and saying, "He's not real!" The cabin grew tense. Then the man stood up. He walked down the aisle, his movements jerky and unnatural. Passengers screamed as he passed by, his face expressionless. When he reached the cockpit door, he vanished. The pilot, alarmed by the commotion, decided to make an emergency landing. Once on the ground, the crew searched the plane but found no trace of the man. However, in the seat where he had been sitting, they discovered something horrifying. A small, weathered photograph of the man, dated 1954, with a note on the back that read, "I'm still waiting." Emma later researched the flight's history and discovered that in 1954, a man had died on the same route. He had been traveling to meet his fiancée but suffered a heart attack mid-flight. His body had been stored in the cargo hold until the plane landed. The airline retired the plane shortly after the incident, but passengers on other flights have reported seeing the same man, always dressed in that brown suit, always staring ahead. Some say he's still waiting to reach his destination, and if you ever see him on your flight, don't make eye contact.